What would you do if the person you trusted the most harbored a secret so sinister it could destroy everything? Darnell Hayes, a celebrated Ohio tycoon, seemed to have it all: success, wealth, and a loving marriage. But when his wife, Rochelle, uncovered the truth about his secret drug empire, her determination to do the right thing set off a chain of events that led to betrayal, poison, and a horrifying murder. This isn't just a story about greed and deception, it's a chilling reminder of how desperation and ambition can turn love into a weapon and lead to unimaginable tragedy. Before we dive into this shocking tale of betrayal and murder, don't forget to subscribe to Crime Chronicles, where we uncover the darkest stories that leave you questioning the truth about those closest to you. Darnell Hayes, 49, was the epitome of success. As the CEO of Hayes Enterprises, a multi-million-dollar real estate company based in Ohio, he had built an empire that earned him admiration and envy in equal measure. His towering presence and sharp charisma made him a commanding figure in business and social circles. At his side was his wife Rochelle, 42, a poised and intelligent woman who complemented Darnell's ambition with her grace and charm. Together, they seemed to embody the ideal power couple: wealthy, influential, and deeply in love. Their sprawling estate in the upscale suburbs of Cleveland was the envy of many. With its manicured gardens and a driveway lined with luxury cars, it was a testament to their shared success. Rochelle often hosted lavish dinner parties, where she charmed guests with her warmth while Darnell entertained them with tales of his business conquests. From the outside, their marriage appeared to be unshakable, a union built on trust and mutual respect. But behind the dazzling facade, cracks were beginning to form. Rochelle, ever the observant partner, had noticed subtle changes in Darnell's behavior. He had become more secretive, taking long, hushed phone calls late at night and disappearing for hours without explanation. Rochelle dismissed these moments at first, chalking them up to the demands of running a major company. But over time, her unease grew. One day, while organizing Darnell's home office, Rochelle stumbled across something that changed everything. Tucked away in a locked drawer was a leather-bound notebook. Inside, she found a series of cryptic entries: dates, locations, and names, all of which seemed unrelated to his real estate ventures. Alongside these were large cash withdrawals from accounts she didn't recognize. Alarmed, Rochelle began piecing together the fragments of information, and a chilling realization dawned: Darnell was involved in something far more sinister than she could have imagined. Unable to contain her fear and confusion, Rochelle decided to confront Darnell. She waited until dinner that evening, hoping the privacy of their dining room would keep the conversation civil. "Darnell," she began, her voice steady but strained, "I found something today. A notebook. There are entries in it that don't make sense to me. Large amounts of money, unfamiliar names. I need you to explain what's going on." Darnell's fork froze mid-air, his eyes narrowing as he gauged her expression. The air between them grew thick with tension. "Rochelle," he said carefully, his tone low and measured, "you shouldn't be snooping around my things. There are aspects of my business that you wouldn't understand. It's better if you leave this alone." His dismissal only fueled her resolve. "Darnell, I'm not blind. This isn't just about real estate, is it? What are you involved in? Tell me the truth." For a moment, Darnell's composed exterior cracked. He leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "Rochelle, you have no idea what you're stepping into. This is bigger than you, bigger than us. Let it go." But Rochelle couldn't let it go. She loved Darnell, but the man she had trusted for years was now a stranger, and his secrets were beginning to unravel their perfect life. The confrontation ended in a strained silence, each retreating to their separate corners of the house. Unbeknownst to Rochelle, her discovery had set into motion a chain of events that would lead to betrayal, heartbreak, and a crime so shocking it would change their lives forever. Rochelle couldn't unsee the truth. The man she had built her life with, the man she had trusted with her heart, was hiding something dark, and she refused to let it fester in the shadows. Darnell's warnings only strengthened her resolve. She wasn't the kind of woman who would stand idly by while secrets consumed her marriage. Rochelle decided she needed proof, not just for herself, but for the authorities, if it came to that. Late at night, after Darnell fell asleep in the guest room, Rochelle returned to his office. Her hands trembled as she carefully sifted through his files, her mind racing with every document she uncovered. Bank statements showed massive cash withdrawals. There were emails flagged as urgent from names she didn't recognize. A burner phone hidden in the back of his desk drawer revealed text messages coordinating shipments to various locations. Rochelle's stomach churned as the pieces fell into place. Darnell was operating a drug trafficking network, using his legitimate business as a front. But Rochelle knew she couldn't face this alone. The enormity of what she had uncovered was overwhelming. The following morning, she called her best friend, Patrice, someone she trusted implicitly. Patrice had been by her side since college, a fierce and loyal confidant. When Patrice arrived, Rochelle wasted no time, pacing the room as she recounted everything she'd discovered. Patrice listened intently, her face a mix of shock and concern. "Rochelle, this is serious," Patrice said, her voice low but firm. "If Darnell is involved in this, you're not safe. You need to go to the police." Rochelle shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't, at least not yet. I need more evidence, something concrete. If I go to the authorities now, he'll know. He's already suspicious of me, Patrice. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells." Patrice placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then you need to be careful. Whatever you do, don't let him know you're digging into this. Promise me, Rochelle." But secrecy was easier said than done. Darnell was a man who thrived on control, and Rochelle's newfound defiance didn't go unnoticed. Their arguments became more frequent and explosive, each one chipping away at the carefully curated image of their perfect marriage. "Why can't you just let this go?" Darnell snapped one evening, slamming his glass down on the counter. "I told you everything is under control. You're blowing this out of proportion, Rochelle." She stood her ground, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "Under control? You're running a drug empire, Darnell. Do you even hear yourself? This isn't just about you. People are getting hurt because of what you're doing. How can you live with yourself?" Darnell's eyes darkened, his usual composure giving way to something more dangerous. "You don't know what you're talking about," he growled. "This is my business, Rochelle. You've lived this life of luxury because of me. Don't act like you're above it now." But Rochelle wasn't swayed. She was determined to expose the truth, even if it meant risking everything. Darnell, however, was reaching his breaking point. For years, he had meticulously maintained control over every aspect of his life. Now, that control was slipping through his fingers, and the thought of losing everything, his empire, his reputation, his freedom, pushed him into a dangerous corner. As the tension between them mounted, Rochelle's determination clashed with Darnell's desperation. The house that once symbolized their success now felt like a battleground, each moment teetering on the edge of disaster. Rochelle didn't know how far Darnell would go to protect his secrets, but she was about to find out. Darnell Hayes sat alone in his study, his mind racing. The walls felt as though they were closing in on him, and Rochelle's defiance was like a ticking time bomb. He knew she wasn't backing down, and it terrified him. She had too much evidence, too much determination, and too much to lose. His entire empire, his legacy, was on the line. He couldn't let her destroy everything he'd built, no matter the cost. As the hours passed, Darnell's fear hardened into resolve. There was only one way to ensure Rochelle wouldn't expose him. It was a chilling, unthinkable decision, but desperation had erased the boundaries of morality. Rochelle had to be silenced. Permanently. He devised his plan carefully. A man like Darnell didn't act on impulse, he thrived on precision and control. He would take Rochelle to the remote cabin they had once called their getaway spot, a secluded place where no one could hear them. The invitation would seem innocent, a chance to reconnect, to talk things through. Rochelle would believe he was finally ready to make amends, and that hope would be her undoing. The night before they were set to leave, Darnell meticulously prepared. He procured a vial of poison, a tasteless and odorless substance he had acquired through a discreet contact. It was quick, effective, and left little trace, a calculated choice for a man determined to avoid suspicion. "Rochelle," he said the next morning, his tone softer than it had been in weeks. "I've been thinking. You're right. We need to talk, just the two of us. Let's go to the cabin this weekend. It'll be good for us." Rochelle hesitated, searching his face for sincerity. For a moment, she saw a glimpse of the man she had married, the man who had once been her partner, her confidant. Against her better judgment, she agreed. The drive to the cabin was quiet, filled with an uneasy tension. Darnell played the part of a remorseful husband perfectly, speaking about their past and the need to rebuild trust. Rochelle, despite her suspicions, wanted to believe him. She clung to the hope that this trip could mark a turning point, that maybe Darnell was finally ready to change. When they arrived, the cabin was exactly as they had left it years ago. The air was crisp, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the secluded location felt both peaceful and eerie. Darnell lit a fire in the hearth, setting a warm and inviting scene. He poured 2 glasses of wine, his hands steady despite the storm raging within him. "To new beginnings," he said, handing Rochelle a glass. She smiled faintly, raising her glass to meet his. "To new beginnings." As Rochelle sipped her wine, Darnell watched her intently. He had mixed the poison into her drink moments before. His heart pounded in his chest, but his expression remained calm, almost tender. At first, nothing seemed amiss. Rochelle continued to talk, her guard slowly lowering as the warmth of the wine and the fire enveloped her. But then, her words began to falter. She reached for her throat, her eyes widening in confusion and fear. "Darnell. I feel strange," she managed to say, her voice trembling. He didn't respond, simply watching as the poison took effect. Rochelle collapsed to the floor, her body convulsing as she struggled to breathe. Her eyes locked onto his, a mix of betrayal and disbelief etched onto her face. "I'm sorry, Rochelle," he whispered, his voice devoid of emotion. "But you left me no choice." Within moments, Rochelle's body went still. The room was silent, save for the crackling of the fire. Darnell stood over her, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. There was no turning back now. He had crossed a line that could never be undone. Darnell spent the next hour staging the scene, his mind a meticulous web of plans and details. He knew he couldn't leave Rochelle's death looking too suspicious. He had to create a narrative that would absolve him of any involvement, a story the authorities would accept without question. He had decided on an accidental overdose, a tragedy that would fit the circumstances and divert suspicion. The first step was to move Rochelle's lifeless body to the couch near the fireplace. He adjusted her posture carefully, placing her hands loosely by her sides to mimic someone who had passed out. The effort was clinical, detached. Darnell couldn't afford emotion now. His survival depended on precision. From his bag, he retrieved the items he had brought to complete the scene, an empty pill bottle, a half-filled glass of wine, and a printed note he had written in advance. The note was simple yet heartbreaking, designed to look like Rochelle had written it during a moment of despair. "Life has become too overwhelming. I can't take the pain anymore. Please forgive me." He placed the note on the coffee table next to the wine glass, ensuring it looked casually left behind. He then emptied several pills from the bottle onto the table, scattering them as if Rochelle had fumbled in her final moments. Next, Darnell set about wiping down the cabin. He meticulously cleaned every surface he had touched, leaving no trace of his presence. He wore gloves the entire time, his movements methodical and deliberate. The only evidence left behind would point to Rochelle herself. The final touch was the fireplace. Darnell stoked the flames, adding a few logs to ensure the cabin felt warm and lived in. The setting was perfect, a quiet, isolated retreat where someone might come to think, to reflect, and, tragically, to end it all. As he surveyed the scene, Darnell felt a grim sense of satisfaction. It was flawless, he told himself. The authorities would find Rochelle's body, the note, and the scattered pills, and they would come to the conclusion he wanted them to reach. Still, there was a flicker of doubt in the back of his mind. Had he forgotten anything? Was there some tiny detail he had overlooked? He shook the thoughts away. He had planned every aspect of this. He had to trust in his own meticulousness. With one last glance at Rochelle, Darnell left the cabin. The air outside was crisp, the silence almost deafening. As he drove away, he felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Rochelle was gone, and with her, the threat to his empire. But as much as Darnell tried to convince himself the plan was foolproof, he couldn't escape the nagging sense that something, some small, unforeseen detail, might bring it all crashing down. The morning after Darnell left the cabin, a heavy silence hung over the secluded area. He had taken every precaution to make sure Rochelle's death appeared to be a tragic accident. But even in the quiet woods, the truth has a way of slipping through the cracks, no matter how much one tries to bury it. Patrice, Rochelle's best friend, immediately sensed something was wrong. When Rochelle failed to return her calls for a few days, a knot of dread began to form in her stomach. It was unlike Rochelle to simply disappear without a word. Patrice reached out to Darnell, but his responses were short, dismissive, and increasingly defensive. Something was off. The dread grew stronger when Darnell claimed he hadn't seen Rochelle since they'd left for the cabin. Patrice had never trusted Darnell completely, but now, something in his voice, something too calm, too rehearsed, struck her as odd. After 2 days with no word from Rochelle, Patrice called the police and gave them all the details they needed to start the investigation. Detective Marcus Boyd, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving complex cases, was assigned to the case. Boyd arrived at the Hayes estate with his team, immediately noticing the tension in the air. Darnell was a prominent figure in Ohio, and this case would garner plenty of media attention. As the police began their investigation, the first lead came when they were informed that Darnell and Rochelle had gone to the cabin for a supposed reconciliation weekend. The cabin was remote, far off the beaten path, with little traffic around it. When the officers arrived at the scene, they found Rochelle's body slumped in front of the fireplace, cold and lifeless. At first glance, the scene seemed eerily calm, with nothing immediately out of place. A note was placed on the coffee table, written in a shaky hand, claiming that Rochelle had ended her life. The bottle of pills, the glass of wine, and the scattered remnants of a once luxurious evening appeared to confirm the story of a tragic overdose. But Detective Boyd wasn't convinced. Something about the scene didn't sit right with him. The positioning of the body felt off. Why had Rochelle, in the middle of what seemed to be a quiet evening, not even tried to make it to a phone? Why was there no sign of a struggle? And more importantly, why did she seem so perfectly placed, almost as if someone had carefully staged the scene? Boyd instructed his team to take detailed photographs of the area and immediately ordered an autopsy on Rochelle's body. The autopsy would be the key to determining whether this was, in fact, a suicide as Darnell claimed, or something far more sinister. As the weeks passed, the investigators carefully pieced together the details. The forensic analysis of the body revealed something shocking: traces of poison. Rochelle's body had been poisoned with a tasteless and odorless substance, one that would have gone unnoticed unless the authorities knew what they were looking for. The poison had caused her body to shut down slowly, as her organs failed one by one. It wasn't the kind of death someone would bring upon themselves, especially not in a moment of despair. This was a calculated, intentional act. Meanwhile, Detective Boyd's team continued their investigation, uncovering more unsettling details. They found that Rochelle had been gathering evidence of Darnell's criminal activity for weeks before her death. Among her personal items were documents linking Darnell to illegal drug trafficking operations, hidden bank accounts, and a trail of wire transfers that led back to suspicious organizations. But the most damning evidence came from a source that Boyd hadn't expected: audio recordings found on Rochelle's phone. After hearing the recordings, it became clear to Boyd that Rochelle had known she was in danger. The recordings were her final act of defiance, capturing conversations she'd had with her best friend, Patrice, and moments when she'd confronted Darnell about his criminal activities. One recording stood out in particular: Rochelle's calm yet urgent message to Patrice, where she confided her growing fear for her life. She had intended to bring the evidence to the authorities, but she had never gotten the chance. Patrice's heart sank when Detective Boyd informed her about the recordings. She had no idea Rochelle had been documenting everything. She could only imagine how much she had known and how much she had been willing to risk to stop Darnell from destroying more lives. The fear in Rochelle's voice during the recordings was chilling. It was clear she knew her marriage was on the verge of collapsing, but she had no idea that it would cost her everything. As Detective Boyd delved deeper, the cracks in Darnell's story became wider. His alibi for the night of Rochelle's death began to unravel, as further interviews with those who knew him revealed inconsistencies in his timeline. His claim of a peaceful reconciliation trip to the cabin seemed more like a cover-up, and Boyd suspected that Darnell had staged the scene to divert suspicion. It wasn't. Boyd and his team built a rock-solid case. The final straw came when Darnell's cell phone records were analyzed, revealing a series of calls and messages made from a burner phone he had used to coordinate the drug shipments, a phone that Rochelle had found weeks earlier. As the investigation drew to a close, the evidence was undeniable. Darnell Hayes, the wealthy tycoon who had once been the epitome of success, was arrested for the murder of his wife, Rochelle. The community was stunned. The man who had so carefully crafted an image of power and integrity had killed the one person who trusted him the most, all to protect his empire. The investigation had uncovered the dark truth behind the perfect facade of the Hayes marriage. What had appeared to be a tragic, misguided act of desperation had, in fact, been a cold-blooded murder driven by greed, fear, and a need for control. As the case went to trial, the world waited to see how this shocking crime would unfold, and whether justice would be served for Rochelle, who had been silenced in her quest to expose the truth. The trial of Darnell Hayes was a national spectacle, filled with revelations of betrayal and murder. Once a celebrated businessman, Darnell now faced charges of first-degree murder for killing his wife, Rochelle. The courtroom was packed with spectators eager to see justice served, as the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of his guilt. Prosecutor Angela Rhodes wasted no time laying out the case. She presented Rochelle's autopsy report, which confirmed poisoning as the cause of death, and detailed the staged suicide note that Darnell had left behind. The jury listened intently to Rochelle's secret recordings, where she expressed her fear of Darnell and her plans to expose his illegal activities. Each piece of evidence painted Darnell as a calculating murderer who killed his wife to protect his drug empire. The defense attempted to argue that Rochelle's death was an accident or the result of emotional distress. They cited the staged note as evidence of her supposed despair, but their claims were dismantled by forensic evidence and testimony from Rochelle's best friend, Patrice. Patrice provided a vivid account of Rochelle's fear and determination to expose Darnell, leaving the jury visibly moved. Her testimony proved crucial in demonstrating Rochelle's state of mind and Darnell's motive for silencing her. When Darnell took the stand, his polished demeanor quickly unraveled. Under cross-examination, Rhodes confronted him with the inconsistencies in his story and the mountain of evidence against him. His evasive answers and visible frustration only solidified the jury's perception of his guilt. By the time he left the stand, the courtroom was convinced of his role in Rochelle's murder. The jury deliberated for less than a day before delivering their verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. As the judge read the decision, Rochelle's family and friends wept, finding solace in the justice they had fought for. Darnell sat expressionless, the weight of his crimes finally catching up to him. Darnell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. In the aftermath, Darnell's empire crumbled. Hayes Enterprises was dismantled, his assets seized, and his reputation tarnished beyond repair. The once celebrated businessman became a symbol of greed and betrayal, his name synonymous with tragedy. For Rochelle's loved ones, the trial's conclusion brought mixed emotions. Justice had been served, but it could never undo the loss. Patrice established a foundation in Rochelle's memory to support victims of abuse, ensuring her friend's courage would never be forgotten. Rochelle's family began the slow process of healing, holding on to her memory as they moved forward. Darnell's life ended in obscurity, confined to a prison cell. The man who had once been admired for his success was left to face the consequences of his actions, his legacy forever defined by the woman he betrayed and the life he destroyed. This chilling story is a stark reminder of how unchecked ambition and betrayal can destroy even the most seemingly perfect lives. Rochelle's courage in the face of her husband's deception serves as a testament to her integrity, even as it cost her everything. Darnell's actions show the terrifying lengths some will go to protect their darkest secrets. What would you have done in Rochelle's place? Can betrayal ever truly be hidden, or does the truth always find its way to the surface? If this story left you speechless, hit that like button and subscribe to Crime Chronicles to join us for more gripping true crime tales that expose the deepest secrets and darkest betrayals.